Okay, so I'm realizing I'm kind of in a weird spot with my streams because I upload them every time. Um or I just I let them stay public or whatever. And oh, I could put the chat right in here. Okay. Sorry. I upload them every time. So I'm a little bit torn between what audience is this for? Is this for the people in the live or is this for the people in the future that are going to be watching this after the fact? And frankly, I don't have enough live viewers to really tailor towards a live audience. Like right now, there's nobody watching. I think there might be a couple people that end up joining today. Kind of my buddies, my regulars now. They're buddies as a result of this. Um, and so when I start something here and then they join in, I kind of have to reiterate once they join in. Otherwise, they lose the context. It's not really fair to them. So, um, you know, it is what it is. It doesn't really matter. I'm not doing these for views. I'm just doing this so I can discuss ideas and have footage for my videos. So, um, if you are watching this after the fact, uh, you might have to skip around a little bit unless you want to just see me kind of struggle through it. That's also fine. Um, today, today I want to do something. Oh, we have a chat already, and I don't even. It's not. I'm not seeing it here. Give me one sec. Um, I wanted to. I wanted to put an idea out there. Um, gosh, this is frustrating. Why is this happening? Okay, yeah, I'm not seeing anybody here. I wanted to put an idea out there for a potential video. Uh, Banana Bread, how's it going? Good to see ya. So today I am just fielding an idea because on Wednesday I was going over a couple ideas for a couple new videos. So just to get you caught up, I have a bunch of videos coming out in the next couple months. I have the Siren video that we've been working on for the last little while. Um, that one's coming along, but I've definitely I hit a little bit of a snag, and it was a struggle to figure out how to really turn it into a video that was interesting. I think I got it now, but it's slightly on the back burner because I also ended up getting in a situation where um, I've got a couple sponsored videos coming up. I won't go into any detail about the sponsorships particularly, other than the fact that the videos are coming out on June 15th and July 20th at the latest. So there's going to be 3 videos coming out within the next 2 months, and that is by far uh, the most condensed amount of videos I've ever had to do. And I haven't figured out what those 2 videos are going to be yet. It could be about anything. So there's no real limitation. The big limitation I'm trying to figure out is it's got to be something that I can do within like a month, and it's got to be something that I know will work. And so one of the ideas, I wanted to revisit my 3D printed kick drum video, doing the tiny little kick drum. But I'm concerned about that because the last time I did that, I failed and it didn't work. And I feel kind of confident I can make it work, but at the same time, it would be weeks of me putting in effort. And then if it doesn't work, that really sucks. So I don't want to commit to that just yet. But I do have an adjacent idea that I think is really cool, and I wanted to kind of discuss that and see what you thought of it, and maybe just sort of brainstorm and do a little bit of research, just like on stream. It's going to be kind of we might not actually even work on anything. We'll just kind of be discussing ideas and going over potential potential plan for this video. So Just give me 1 second. I gotta shut my door because I had to let my cat in, and she's finally decided to come in, and I'm gonna keep the heat in. 1 sec. So, and just to get you caught up a little bit too, as far as the siren is concerned, I think as far as the buildings concerned, we're basically done. I'm not sure if I'm gonna end up doing a song now with these other videos coming through, so we'll have to see. I might do something just little, but the songs end up taking quite a large chunk of time away from the video, so I need to be strategic about that. So my idea, here's my idea, right? And it came from the idea that I wanted to build a tiny little kick drum. You know, it was going to be about this big. This was my sample test. And it was going to be like a tongue drum. Because when you hit this tongue vibrates at a really slow or a relatively slow rate. So it can give us those low frequencies that a big kick drum has. But I'm going to move this down, actually, because I don't need this to be here. So then it feels like I'm talking to the camera. There's one big problem with the idea of doing this tiny kick drum. Aside from the fact that, like, there's a reason why kick drums are so big. And it's just like the way frequency works. It's the way resonance works. Bigger things can produce these lower frequencies naturally, whereas small things can't really. And, you know, small speakers and stuff can do it using DSP and really specifically fine-tuned channels and that kind of thing. But for a kick drum, that's kind of the thing I'm trying to beat. But one of the big issues that I can't figure out how to get around is the fact that when you hit a drum. So here's my kick drum pedal, right? And let's see, you can kind of see it. So you press on the pedal and the beater flies forward. Pretty simple mechanism. And as a drummer, there's two ways you could play this. You can either hit the skin like this, so the beater bounces off. And that's like more the traditional way to play. But then there's also what's called burying the beater, where you stomp on the kick drum and you let the beater rest against the skin. I happen to be a guy that likes to bury the beater when I'm playing drums. I can play it. I've been in situations where I wasn't allowed to, or I wasn't able to bury the kick drum because we wanted a specific tone. It does change the tone of the drum. However, on a large kick drum, when you bury the beater, it obviously prevents that fundamental resonance from happening within the skin, but you still have the entire drum and the remainder of the skin vibrating and resonating in a low frequency, so it doesn't actually really affect the low tone of the drum too much. You reduce some of the resonance, you usually get a much sharper attack on a kick drum. When you bury the beater, you get a lot shorter sustain of a kick drum when you bury the beater. However, with something like this, where the vibration is coming from a small tongue like this, burying the beater in any situation will totally kill all of the low frequency entirely. In a tongue drum like this, all of the low frequency has to come from this one part that you end up hitting. On a regular kick drum, the low frequency comes from the whole the drum as a whole. So by burying the beater, you're reducing some low frequencies, but you're still getting a lot of residual low frequency. With this tiny kick drum, you bury the beater, you kill 100% of the low frequency entirely. That sucks. That's not what we want to happen. I want to be able to play this tiny kick drum the same way I would play a regular kick drum. In fact, I want there to be nuance there. I want you to be able to kind of choose to either bury or because when you're playing drums, it's an active choice when you're playing to either bury the beater or bounce it. That affects the tone, and that's something you think about when you're playing drums. So what I need to do is I need a kick drum pedal, or not necessarily a kick drum pedal, but I need a way that the beater will make contact with the thing that's going to resonate. But regardless if you bury or bounce the pedal, I need the beater to hit the skin and bounce off, regardless. And this might sound like it's like kind of a unique concept, but it's really not, because the key on a piano, on an acoustic piano, does exactly this already. And it's a fascinating, if you've ever looked inside of a piano, it is a fascinating mechanism that does it. And I'll pull up an image of it, actually. Okay, I'm going to bring this back up. I'm going to pull up an image here. Piano key mechanism. Let's do an upright. So a piano key mechanism is honestly insanely complex. I think there's about 90 moving parts. Or is it 90? Is that right? I don't know. I don't quote me on that. I just remember reading something like that. So this is what goes on inside of a piano, right? I'm sure you've seen like this image before. But we'll go back to that diagram so that I can really explain how this works, because it's fascinating. And essentially my plan is I want to build a kick drum pedal that uses this mechanism. So how this works is when you depress the key, instead of there being a direct link between the actual hammer and the key, what you're doing is this key is essentially throwing this hammer at the string. And so when you look at this pedal here, what we need to happen is you press the pedal part down, the beater is then thrown towards the skin, it hits it, but then it bounces off. And that's what we need to mimic for this pedal. But there's so many other factors involved, because you want to be able to hit it as fast as you can possibly do with your foot. Because if you had a pedal that you couldn't hit it as fast as you could, then that would really limit what you can actually play. So it needs to be fast enough that it will play as fast as humanly possible. So in order to do that, you have this catcher here. So looking on the diagram again, this little thing here is a catcher. And what that does is when it throws the pedal, or when it throws the beater, as long as you have the pedal depressed and the beater bounces back, it only bounces back like a tiny little bit. And it'll stay there as long as the pedal's depressed. And this allows you to continue hitting it from this distance, as opposed to having to have it come all the way back to reload. It never actually reloads. It only needs to come back this far to reload. So that's one feature that makes this whole mechanism so complex. You have the jack here. So this little arm, what this is doing is when you press down on the key, the lever is happening here. So this part of the key moves up. This jack, what it does is it presses against this hammer butt, and this is what launches the hammer forward. But once the hammer gets to about this point, the jack slips out of the way. And that's what throws the hammer and then allows the hammer to retract the tiniest little bit. So again, that's another really, really fascinating little mechanism that goes on. And this is, keep in mind, in a piano, you've got 88 of these mechanisms. It's just insane. Just hang on. Okay, not important. So that's another feature. Now, that on its own would be really cool, and that would solve my issue with my tiny kick drum. That would allow us to have a pedal that would be able to strike our resonating tongue, or whatever we're going to use to resonate. That would allow us to strike it, and even if you hold the pedal down and play in a buried beater configuration, the beater will still back off enough that the thing can resonate. But what's really cool about a piano is it also includes a damper. And so this damper here, you can see damper, this is also actuated by the same key press. And what happens when you press the key, it lifts up here. This half of the mechanism actuates the hammer. And at the same time, it lowers and allows and pulls the damper away from the string. And that damper stays away from the string until you release the pedal, or until you release the key. And once you release the key, that damper comes back and touches the string again. So on a piano, when you're playing a key, you can either tap it and you get a really quick little dun dun dun, and that's because the damper is, as soon as you release your key, the damper is dampening the string. But if you hit a key and hold it, you get a dun, and that's because the damper stays off that string until you release that key. And so this adds a level of nuance to playing a piano that's never been done in drums before. And so my thinking is, if we redid this entire mechanism, but in the form factor of a kick drum pedal, what we would get is the ability to actually decide how long a kick drum resonates for. So like right now, with a standard kick drum pedal, you can either get like a doop, 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 just a quick little punchy kick drum sound, because by burying it, you're killing the resonance. Or you bounce and you get a dong, dong, dong. But there's no in between there. You either get the full resonance of the kick drum, or you get the smallest amount of resonance. But using a piano key mechanism, we could have it so that you could have a dong, dong, dong. You could decide how long that resonance lasts for. And I think when you're playing drums and you have that ability, all of a sudden now lifting your foot off the pedal is another thing that you can think about while you're playing, and it'll actually influence a different sounding beat. You could be playing the exact same beat, but depending on when you lift your foot from the pedal, it would sound different. And those are the kind of like little nuanced things that I think make instrument development so important. It would be really subtle, of course. It wouldn't be like a super noticeable thing, but it would be something that is totally brand new in terms of drums. It would be something that would add a layer of complexity to playing drums that I think any drummer would appreciate. But it does so in a way that even if you don't want to think about that and you want to just play drums the normal way, you could still play this drum as if it was just a regular kick drum pedal. So that's my thinking. I think this would be a really cool video. Of course, with every video I'm doing now, I have to consider the packaging, so I have to consider the thumbnail and the title of this. And I think something along the lines of, like, I put a piano mechanism in my kick drum pedal is a pretty good title. Or I put a piano key. I built a piano key for my kick drum. Something along those lines would be kind of cool. And then as far as a thumbnail, you would have a big regular kick drum, and instead of having a kick drum pedal, you would have something that looks like this hitting it. I think that would be pretty cool. It's hard to say because I haven't built it yet. What I like about this idea is if I have to, I can just straight up copy this. I know this mechanism works already, so the possibility for failure is lower. Hey, Psycho Ruby Gamer, welcome back. I'm pivoting a little bit, and it's actually funny because on Wednesday we were discussing the two separate ideas of having the tiny kick drum and then the piano MIDI controller. And so the last couple days I was working on the kick drum idea because I felt compelled just to do that. But I ran, I was doing research about how low frequencies are made and how easy it's going to be to put that into a small form factor. It's going to be hard. And so this whole idea came from the fact that I want to be able to basically replace a regular kick drum pedal with the mechanism of a keyboard or of a piano key. Because what a piano key does is it throws the hammer at the string and immediately backs the hammer off, regardless if you hold the note down or not. And I don't know if you remember, we were talking about the difference between burying a beater versus bouncing a beater. So this idea would allow you to bury the beater and still get a full amount of resonance out of this tiny little kick drum, which through my research I'm realizing I probably need to do that. So yeah, so I'm thinking I'm going to try and design a new kick drum pedal that uses the concepts of a piano keyboard to deliver a strike that automatically backs the beater off for you, so you don't have to worry about if you're burying the beater or not. And then I was just saying that you'd have the added benefit of where a piano keyboard has a damper, so you can actually control how much resonance you're getting, how long that resonance lasts. And this doesn't even have to be just for a kick drum. I think this piano key mechanism is such a fascinating mechanism. You could use this to hit a bunch of different things. It'd be really cool if you set this up to just hit like a metal plate or something, or you could have it hitting like a really fat string or a pipe or something that resonates, and then you can control how much damping, how long the resonance happens for. So this is my thinking. Now I'm trying to decide how to go about the actual prototyping of this and the build of this, because I have a kick drum pedal here. It already almost does what it needs to do at a very basic level. I feel like I could probably just modify this exact pedal using a bunch of 3D printed parts to work like a piano keyboard. Or alternatively, I build the whole thing from scratch and make it much closer to an actual piano key. The issue with that is I'm just not sure about the durability. Something like this is going to be very durable, obviously, because it's already built to take the abuse. So I'm kind of leaning towards actually just modifying a standard pedal like this. But that's where I got to before I started this stream. So I'd love your thoughts. Is this a cool idea? That's the most important thing. Like, does this sound like something that would be interesting to watch? To me, it's an extremely novel idea. It's a very subtle thing. I just really like how like a kick drum pedal and a piano key technically at a fundamental level do the same thing. You press a lever, a beater actuates and hits a surface. But when you get down to the details, they actually do totally different things. A piano key is like infinitely more complicated than a kick drum pedal. And the playability would be heavily impacted in a what I think is a very positive way. So let me know what you think. I'm pretty excited about this, but I'm not too sure. Sounds interesting to me, but I could also see how it could be boring. It would just be a vertical piano key. Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. Like, I obviously don't want to just, like, I'm not sure if, like, from a video perspective, if like that was sort of my thought. That was my thought, because, like, piano, you know, everybody knows a piano. Who gives a shit, really? But it wasn't until I started looking at the piano key mechanism where I was like, oh my god, this is actually such a beautiful, complex thing that took 300 years to develop. 300 years to develop a piano key to the point where it's at now, and it stayed at that point. Like, once it got to the point that it's at now, it's like no development happened there. And from my understanding, a piano is the only thing in the world that uses a mechanism like this. So that's why I feel like taking this mechanism and using it in a different way might be really interesting. And I'm not sure if I'm not sure what direction to go with it. Like, do I talk about the history of how the piano key was developed, or do I just sort of pepper that in throughout the video of the actual build? I think that's the other reason why I think modifying a kick drum pedal would be better, because it's not just me building something that already exists. It would be me actually taking the core concept of what a piano does and seeing if I can rework it in a totally different way. Because there are, like, some pretty fundamental differences. One of them being the fact that a kick drum pedal, the pivot is at the back. The pivot is at the back end here, and you play it up front. Whereas on a keyboard, it's the opposite way. From that point of view, it definitely sounds more interesting. If you make a video of this, I would definitely point out that the piano is the only instrument that uses that. Right? Like it's such a crazy thing to me. And the other thing too is, like, maybe using some 3D printing and compliant mechanism stuff, we could actually develop the piano key differently than how it's been done for 300 years. And it's funny, you can buy a brand new piano these days and the keys are still made, like, it looks like it's made of, like, bubble gum and popsicle sticks. It's crazy. Like, $300,000 $400,000 pianos, they all have these, like, cobbled together wooden mechanisms that are super delicate. So the idea of trying to make one that is actually, like, robust enough to handle what a drummer would put it through, I think would be an interesting engineering challenge. Taking the core concepts of what a piano key does, but flipping it so that, for one, the pedal actuates the same as a kick drum pedal actuates, and reinventing it in a way. So yeah, I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly. I literally just thought of that today. The big thing is that I think this is a necessary step towards doing the tiny kick drum. Just in my research about how the physics of low frequency sound works, my initial idea. So here's the problem, right? With a tiny body like this, my initial idea was that you can strike. The only trouble is how would you also integrate the mute pedal? Well, that's the other thing. So I definitely would have the damper, right? The damper here. I think that would be a relatively easy thing to integrate. Well, this is what's so exciting. I don't know if you were here. I was explaining this to Banana Bread. What would be so cool about this, and it would be subtle, but it would be so cool because right now on a kick drum or on a kick drum pedal, there's two options. You bury the beater, you get a more dead sound. It kills a lot of the resonance. Or you bounce and you get the full resonance of the kick drum. There's no in between. You either get full resonance you get the full resonance until you hit it again, or you get the minimal resonance. But with a piano, you decide how long it resonates for by holding the pedal down, and then it only dampens as soon as you release the pedal. So from a playability perspective with a kick drum, it's actually the opposite. So with this idea, burying the pedal or burying the beater would result in the longest amount of sustain, and it's not until you release the pedal fully that the damper comes and touches the skin and stops the resonance. And then if you bounce, if you do the bounce technique, it would give you the least amount of resonance, because as soon as you lift your foot off the pedal, or as soon as the beater comes back, the damper would then hit the skin. So it's actually a lot more intuitive, because with a standard kick drum pedal, burying the beater kills the resonance, whereas releasing the beater allows for the most resonance. But on a piano, it's really intuitive. You hit the key, and as long as you're holding it down, the note sustains. And it's not until you release the key that the note stops. That's a much more intuitive thing. And so I'm picturing having... It's going to throw off drummers to an extent. And my feeling is that it won't matter enough. It won't matter enough that you couldn't just play the drum kit regular, because when you're already playing a drum kit and you're kicking the bass, naturally you're releasing your foot at a consistent rate when you hit it. So I think just naturally playing this drum kit with this adapted pedal would sound really good. But for the drummers that want to dive deep into it, all of a sudden the release of their foot becomes another layer of nuance that they can add into their playing. So you could picture you could have beats where your first kick drum hit has super long sustain, and then following kick drum hits only have this tiny little, or have a much shorter impact. It would be something that is only adding a level of complexity to your playing, only if you want to. That's at least what I feel, and there's no way to know until I actually build this thing. And so I'll have to set up a little drum kit to actually test this thing out and see what it feels like to play this thing, because it could be really, really fun, having that extra level of nuance, and would just add some musicality. Hello. Oh, hey Matthew, looks good to me. Are you aware of heel to toe technique in metal? Yeah. So I mean, I think it would still be possible to do that, because the way a piano key works, you know, you can play it as fast as your fingers go. So you would still have that ability to do heel toe. I'm not a if I do metal, I just opt for a double kick drum pedal. I'm not that good. So but I don't think it would affect anybody that actually wants to do heel toe, and I can do a little bit of heel toe, so I can demonstrate that if people have that question. My whole idea, my whole goal would be to add some nuance, and then obviously the real goal of this whole thing is it's another step towards making that tiny kick drum work. So once again, let me just explain why this is necessary for the tiny kick drum idea that is the ultimate goal of all of this. So with a large kick drum, if you because kick drums are so big, naturally they resonate at these low frequencies. The skin resonates, the shell resonates, everything resonates at a lower fundamental frequency. So when you bury the beater in a large kick drum like that, you're not killing the resonance. You still get a lot of that low fundamental tone ringing. And that's why, you know, kick drums are so simple. You don't need to really like think about it too much. With a tiny kick drum idea like this, where the goal of this tiny kick drum would be to have a single, you know, tongue or something that converts your strike into a low fundamental resonance. My idea was to use a tongue like this that would actuate a cone that you could send that could amplify the low frequency. The problem is, and what my initial thought was, okay, you could just strike the top of the tongue. So when you strike the top of the tongue still resonates. And that way, if you bury the beater at the top of the tongue will still resonate a little bit. However, this is the most efficient place to be hitting in order to actuate this resonance. If I wanted to get maximum pressure, SPL or whatever, if I wanted to get maximum pressure, I'd want to be hitting lower on this. And ideally, if I'm hitting lower on the tongue, it means that the tongue will actually move a lot more. And in order to convert that strike energy into a low frequency oscillation like this, I want to get the maximum amount of travel on this tongue. But obviously, in this case, if you bury the beater, there's zero resonance. And because the drum is so small, there would be zero low frequency resonance at all. You would have none. So you would get just a little tink if you're burying the beater. The only way this works is if the beater strikes. It's so weird. Okay, yeah. The only way this works is if the beater strikes and immediately releases itself. You could see it vibrate. It vibrates really nicely when I strike it right here. You can maybe even hear it. It's really subtle, but hitting it up here does not resonate it nearly as much. It does a little bit, but I'm concerned with efficiency here. I'm concerned with converting the strike power into the highest efficiency, low frequency resonance possible. And the best way to do that would be hitting lower down on the tongue. But then that kills the idea of being able to bury the beater, which I really want to be able to do. So could you put the beater up high and then the damper at the end? Well, so that's what I sort of discovered over the last couple days, is putting the beater up high is really reducing the efficiency of converting that initial strike, into an oscillating resonance. The whole goal with this is to be able to take a single strike input and convert it into the highest efficiency oscillating energy as possible. Striking up here kills a huge percentage of that energy. Striking it down here is highly efficient in comparison. But the only way to strike this point and allow it to oscillate is if the beater every time pulls back immediately after the strike. So you want that the other way then. What do you mean? Like this What I'm trying to do is create a mechanism that even if you're burying the beater, the actual beater itself never actually buries itself into the thing that it's hitting. And I was thinking about this. Oh yeah. Well, the damper can be at the same spot. So you could have the beater hitting here. You could have the beater hitting here. And as long as the beater bounces off enough to allow the resonator to resonate, we're golden. And then as soon as you lift off of the pedal, you can have a damper on the other side that just touches the resonator and stops. Yeah, but if the dampener... Yeah, no, so the damper will also be... It could be either on the other side. The damper could stop the resonance on the other side of the tongue, or it can be, just slightly higher, but still closer to the tip of the tongue. The other thing that I'm considering doing is sort of abandoning just like a flexible tongue and doing something that's more like using an actual spring and hinge mechanism, because unless I went for like a spring steel tongue, which would be really hard for me to manufacture, I'd have to outsource that, and then obviously I wouldn't really be able to iterate on that because I don't know how many things I'm going to need to test, so I would have to order that multiple times. It would just get expensive. So a better way to prototype this would be, instead of relying on the actual material's flexiness to resonate, I could just have a hinge and have a spring, and then I could adjust the spring tension. With this, you can use the other side. Yeah. So yeah, like in terms of having the pedal here, you could have a damper that just is sitting on the other side of the tongue, and then as soon as you release the pedal, it comes in and touches, or it would be up here, it comes in and touches the thing. And it would actually be really easy to make, because you could have it so that it travels with the beater, and then it stays off of the tongue until you release the pedal all the way, and then it dampens it. Where was I? What else was I trying to get at? Yeah, so no matter, like, even using my PPSCF filament, again, the goal here is to convert as much of this initial strike into an oscillating wave. And even using my PPSCF filament, which is like, it sounds like metal, it vibrates a lot better than something like PLA, but it still doesn't touch the mechanical efficiency of something like a spring steel does. So that's why, instead of doing a flexible tongue, now I'm leaning towards doing a hinged rod, essentially, that gets all of its oscillation energy from a separate spring, which I can either just replace the spring or have a screw that adjusts the tension of the spring. That'll allow me to prototype this a lot easier without having to rely on ordering specific spring steel parts. And then, if this ends up being something that's like really cool and people actually want, then I can start thinking about developing a version of this that uses like a full-on steel tongue instead, because I think that would look so cool, and it would obviously be like durable enough to last forever. So these are the thoughts. These are the thoughts. What I love, I like how it's ironic. Wait, you can't hit the drum too low because the cone is gonna be in the way. So, and then this is the other thing. It actually might be beneficial for the cone to be higher up. So if I'm hitting down here, it might even be beneficial to have the cone higher up instead, closer to the hinge, because that the issue I'm running into is once I have a cone and I have a whole horn set up, that whole thing is going to be adding a ton of friction and a ton of mass to the whole system. And so with my original idea where I was hitting up top and the cone was near the bottom here, the cone is going to add so much resistance to this whole thing. And so having the thing that adds the most resistance down at the leading edge of this tongue is really going to kill the resonance. But if I have the cone higher up, the leverage of this resonating body will have a much easier time driving that cone. So it's actually, and we can flip this around. So it's going to be, maybe it's going to be upside down now. So the tongue's going to be like this. So we're hitting up here, and then the cone is actually like maybe lower down, being driven by this resonator. And so this will have a much easier time driving that cone and pushing air through that whole labyrinth, and should make the sustain considerably longer lasting. This is great. I love these questions. This is exactly what I need, because I don't have anybody to really bounce these ideas off of. So this is one of the big reasons why I wanted to do these streams. This is exactly what I was hoping for. This is great. And so all of this comes back to, if I want to make the tiny kick drum work, I think I need to reinvent the pedal first. And then at least, even if I can't figure out the tiny kick drum, at least the pedal on its own should be cool enough as a standalone video. But I really just want to give myself the best chance so that when I do eventually come back to the tiny kick drum, I have a much better chance of succeeding this time, because I do not want to do another video where I fail at this. I think it's still possible. It's going to be a quieter drum overall. It's not going to be nearly as loud as a full kick drum. I completely agree. And like what's so fun is like everything I've built, other than the lighting rig stuff, which I had a lot of feedback while I was working on that, and I got to actually use it and let musicians use it. Everything I build, it's just like all a solo mission, and I just do it in my head. But I've never done anything this complicated. And with instruments, it's like a whole level of complexity that I did not think about when I when I started going down this route. Luckily, I'm finding it so fascinating and it's so motivating to actually start to consider these potentially new ideas. Oh yeah, for sure. And like I am my biggest critic. Microphone placement and its coverage might help. Well, that's the thing. I want this tiny kick drum to sound decent in a room not mic'd. I want this to be pretty usable. Like, I'm thinking this would be a useful little thing to bring around, like if you're doing coffee shop gigs with an acoustic, a singer-songwriter acoustic guitar situation where or like what bass beatboxers do. Yeah, and obviously miking it would be nice. And like you could even probably use a contact microphone that would really just only amplify the low frequencies, and that would be really cool. And I think that would be a way that you can use it in bigger show environments or in a recording environment. But the goal of this is I want to have a tiny little drum kit. I want to have a full drum kit that is, a really little thing, because I love like when I'm playing drums, I love kind of being able to be the smallest version of myself as possible. It just feels so good to be able to play in this tiny little shape. So and I've played with so many artists. It's actually really funny. There's two things that got me gigs as a drummer. One of them is my hair. I got the biggest touring act I've ever been on purely because I have long hair. It was between me and this other drummer, and what it came down to was the fact that I had long hair. But then the other thing that got me so many gigs, and the thing that allowed me to maintain that big touring act, was I love playing really quiet. I don't like how loud drums are. And there were multiple situations where, we played big theaters, we played big outdoor venues and stuff where I could play as loud as I wanted, but a majority of the shows we played were little. I did a tour through Germany, and we were playing like people's houses and like tiny little coffee shops where there was no sound system, and we were relying entirely off of just acoustics, and it would be a singer with no microphone. And in those situations, people have to sort of either go the cajon route or just like abandon the drummer altogether. And as a drummer, cajons are dumb. I don't like playing cajon. Not because they're not fun to play, but they just don't they sound like you're hitting a box, in my opinion. So the idea of having this tiny little drum kit that you could essentially put in your backpack and then bring it out, and it still has a really nice, like, low frequency tone to it. It still feels good to play, but is actually like a reduced volume that you could play it pretty regularly. And you would fit right in with like a totally a cappella or like totally acoustic group. I think that's like the real life benefit of what I'm aiming for, if it can be done. And I feel like it has to be able to be possible. And then the other thing that just like tickles me a little bit about this whole idea is, for as long as I can remember, as a drummer, I always felt like drums were like, there is sort of a romantic quality of the simplicity of drums and the fact that they've been around for centuries and they haven't changed really at all. But at the same time, every other instrument has had all of these developments and all of these new things happening to them, but drums really have stayed the same fundamentally for ages. And there's definitely something really nice about that. But like, why not try and experiment with, you know, a totally different approach to the drum, and do it in a way that a regular drummer can adopt it immediately without having to change too much about their playing style. But all of a sudden it opens up all of these different opportunities for like small gigs, or like, you know, if you have a recording studio that's tiny like I do, I don't want to have a drum kit set up in here. That would just be ridiculous. And, or like kids, one of the big things when I was growing up, luckily my parents, my dad's a musician, so it was always a noisy house, but like, you know, we had to stop playing at a certain time because neighbors and everything like that. And like, you know, there's electric drum kits, but they're just not the same. You don't get the nuance out of an electric drum kit that you get out of an acoustic one. And so I always wanted something that I could really play that sounded good, but just wasn't as loud. So there's like, I think there's like so many benefits to having a tiny little drum that's like, you know, half the volume of a regular drum. And then obviously like the cymbals and stuff, that's a whole different thing. I don't know if that's possible. But just a little breakbeat kit, you know, like hi-hat, snare, kick drum. Right? That is the thing about drums. It's like, and drummers get so much flack for it because every musician noodles. Noodling is a part of being a musician, but you can't noodle on if you're in a room with people and you're noodling on the drums, everybody gets mad at you. Guitar players get to just turn their amps off. But a drummer doesn't get that. Yeah, and if you didn't feel so bad about practicing because it was so loud, you would have been able to practice a lot more, and then you would have known how to play. Hello, wife. My wife just joined the chat. So that's where I'm kind of thinking. Same. I've had one since I was like 5. Still in it. Yeah, they're loud. And it's funny because like, I mean, there's obviously a lot of different types of personalities in musicians, but it's like the stereotypical drummer I feel like is kind of shy, isn't really like, you know, notoriously background characters, and so to be that type of person but then also have the loudest instrument is kind of silly to me. But this is like, you know, that's all just like psychological and not actually the case. But I think that's a kind of a funny way to frame it. But I just want this tiny, because this was the other thing too when I was a little kid learning drums. I think I started when I was about 10. I'm not a big guy. I'm a really short guy now. But when I was a kid, I was even smaller. And so, you know, when I was playing drums, if they just felt massive on me, and I would always play with like my elbows up because I like couldn't get high enough to play things, and like the snare drum was so far away from the kick drum and the hi-hat felt so far away. I always wanted to bring them in closer and closer and closer. But there were severe limitations to the size of each individual drum. But the kick drum was the main one. And, you know, I had to have my toms super far away from me. And as a little kid, that really affected my posture as a drummer. You know, I was playing like this, which is like the worst drumming technique. And so it took me years to develop the technique to where, you know, you want elbows down, wrists kind of like, you want to feel relaxed when you're playing. And the smaller the drum kit is, the easier it is to do that. And it gets to the point where it's like, if you could have this tiny little kick drum that's literally smaller than your body, you could just be in the most like compressed, relaxed position as you're playing, and I think it would just be so nice. The only instrument I know how to play was a clarinet because I had to for school. I don't. Yeah, clarinet's interesting. I played a little bit of violin in elementary school because I went to elementary school in Vancouver, which was high Chinese population area. I'm half Chinese, by the way. And so like it was like violin, cello, but mostly just violin. So I used to play a little bit of violin. I that's one that I totally don't know how to play anymore. And then in high school, I joined jazz band, and that's when I got to play drums in school. But I had already been playing drums for a few years before I joined before I went to high school. So that was awesome. I was very excited to get to actually play drums in a school setting. But yeah, at the end of the day, I just want to do some new stuff in the music scene. And like I think it's a good time too, because with music, because everything's like software now, like so much of music production happens in the box or behind a screen. All the innovation in instruments has gone there as well. And I like it. Like I love how easy it is to make music, but it's taken away, I think, a lot of the fundamental understanding of what instruments were. And I think it's such a beautiful thing. Such a beautiful thing. Because it's not a visual thing. And that's what shocked me the most. Oh, hey, I just noticed you have one of the cymbal prototypes in the background. Hey, look. Yeah, I haven't touched the cymbals. I haven't touched the cymbals since releasing that video. That is going to be one of the things that I will focus on, because ultimately this tiny kick drum idea came as a result of like I had this one concept. I just wanted to 3D print a drum kit. And that's evolved now. I don't want to just 3D print a drum kit because that's like a gimmicky thing. I don't really care too much if you can 3D print a drum kit or not. Now it's like, what's the actual... That's what led to the tiny kick drum, which then made me realize like, oh, having a tiny little drum kit that's like a good volume would be so useful. And so now I want to do like a 3D printed drum kit. It could still be largely 3D printed, but the ultimate goal is to have a drum kit that is like tiny and quiet. And so I'm not sure how feasible a 3D printed cymbal is, because cymbals are like a totally different thing. And there's a reason why they cost so much. There's a reason why they're, there's a specific metal composition that works best for them. So I'm going to revisit it. I don't know if I'm going to revisit it from a purely 3D printing standpoint. I might. That might just be, but it might just be an aspect. I don't think it would be interesting enough to do a full video on just a 3D printed cymbal. We'll see. It's one of those things that I just haven't thought too much about yet. I'm so with you on that point. I think the variability in sound and experimentation in the studio kind of capped at around the year 2000, partly due to information sharing being much harder. Yeah. Oh my God, it's like so much of music is just samples and stuff now, it's cool, and there's good stuff out there. But there is a beauty. I'm seeing so many things going viral right now of like guys literally playing like EDM beats on logs and stumps, and they're fun and I like it, but it just kind of goes to show there's a realness to music that's kind of getting taken away from us. There's a physicality about it that I think we're all either consciously or subconsciously sort of missing. And I just think it's beautiful. And what I was trying to say before, I've built a lot of stuff, and like a lot of the building I've done has been very intuitive. I don't know if you guys have seen any of my other videos, but like I built like a closet that compresses your coats. So because I have this, like, it's right there, that green closet. It's a 2 foot by 2 foot space, and in a standard closet, a 2 foot by 2 foot space fits like 10 coats max. This thing I can fit 40 coats in that closet, because it opens up like a book. You can insert your coats, and then when you shut the door, it compresses all the coats. But like all that stuff is like very intuitive. It just like, it's very mechanical. It's very easy to prototype that kind of stuff. But as soon as you get into the world of frequency and resonance and harmonics, all of that stuff is not visual. It's not easy to prototype, and it's like a magical layer of physics that I've never been able to crack, and I still struggle to really understand. But it's like it is like there's an additional layer of understanding that is, I think, like becoming lost. Like there's not a lot of people that focus on this sort of stuff anymore, and it makes the engineering challenges way harder, but it also makes the potential upside way cooler, I think. Maybe your kick drum design will finally get us away from the boom crash of literally every song nowadays. Well, and this is why I'm excited about this piano key kick drum pedal, because that is, so much of music production when it comes to like the drums aspect and the rhythm aspect is like kick drum here, snare drum here. And it's like just a pattern, and like let's just throw a sample in there. But like the really good producers understand that there's a certain feel to having a real player do these things. But even that has been like pretty saturated. And so the idea of adding just one tiny, super subtle ability to now control the resonance of your kick drum and be able to say like, okay, this kick drum, I want it to hit and then last a certain amount of time and then dampen. From a musical nuance perspective, having that one more dimension of playability, I think could influence some actually like new sounding beats, and being able to not do that in software, but do that from a physical playability perspective is a way that you can do it in a very human way, and you can capture a human performance that hasn't been done before, as far as I'm concerned. And I think like when you're playing like marching bands have the big bass drums, I think they do use a hand to dampen, and they can choose when to dampen, but that's obviously a really niche situation. So to put this into a drum kit, I think would be really neat. It might be so subtle that you don't even notice it, but like a lot of music is that. A lot of the music decisions that make that bring a song from being like just like meh to fantastic are these super subtle things that you don't even notice right away. Oh, and this is probably why I'm so fascinated with beatbox these days. Beatbox is crazy. And like that's evolved quite a bit. I get caught up in little beatbox feeds sometimes, and there's some wild stuff that's coming out of the beatbox world. And I think that's kind of a similar thing where it's capturing a human aspect that you don't get from just like pure production. Weird Al on the way to steal your accordion. Yeah, it doesn't make any sound. It doesn't make any sound, unfortunately. So he can have it. He can have it. I'd be curious to see what he does with it. Um, just give me 1 second. I'm getting a weird like vibration sound from my fireplace here. Give me 1 second. I gotta just stop that. Um, no, this was really helpful being able to talk these ideas out. Um, because coming from like the perspective of doing YouTube videos, the ideation process has been the hardest for me. I'm realizing that I got into YouTube because I thought like, oh, these ideas interest me. So if they interest me, then everybody else is going to be interested in them. But I'm realizing there's a lot of things that I find interesting that are really like pretty particular to me, and so it's really helpful to be able to talk these ideas out and find out the things that are actually interesting to other people, and the things that maybe I thought were interesting are just kind of like I could just add in as passing points. Because ultimately I want people I want to inspire people, and I want people to be interested in this stuff, but I need to be smart about how I'm portraying these ideas to not just bore people. One pressing question: why do you need 40 coats? That is a very good question. I actually have way more than 40 coats. So one factor is that my wife and I are like approximately the same size, so we share clothes. Um, and coats, when I was on tour, um, it was like a pop group, and so like our image was pretty important. So and my wife loves thrifting, and so we would go to the thrift store a lot and just pick out kind of the weirdest stuff. And so we ended up just accumulating a lot of these outfits, and like I would bring these outfits on tour, and like also the people I was playing with were like the same size, so we would all kind of like share clothes there too. Um, so I have a lot of like just kind of wacky coats that I never wear anymore. I got to get rid of a bunch of them. And actually, I can't open this closet anymore because I live in the country and we have a lot of like mice here, and there's been mice that got in there, and so I don't want to open it until it's a nice day and I can actually like carefully get rid of all that stuff. But yeah, we were there was a time where we were just like going to thrift stores and spending $40 and come home with like 10 coats. It was a lot of fun. Um, Also, I'm Canadian, so it gets very cold here, and for half of the year I wear coats, sometimes two coats every single day. Um, and I work in them, so they get dirty really often, and so having a lot of coats is like convenient, but it's also uh, it's I'm not I've never been a one coat kind of guy. Um, I'm starting to get that way though. I really have reduced the amount of different clothes I wear. Like I had so many pairs of pants. I had so many individual shirts. Uh, Ties, yeah, ties are cool. I never got into them too much. I'm a big like if I can, I'm gonna try and dress as comfy as possible, and I always find ties to feel a little too restricting. But when I love a good tie when I'm going to like a wedding or something, and I can look real fresh. I think they look so cool, but I don't love the feeling of them, unfortunately. And like lately, since we've moved to the country, I've been like a sweatpants and sweater kind of guy, pretty much exclusively. Um, okay, so hold on, I'm just getting a little bit. There we go. Just cleaning up my page. Um, So yeah, a bit of a weird stream today. Like I'm just brainstorming. I want to be very deliberate about what these next few videos are going to be about. Still working on the Siren video. I think we're basically at the filming stage of that one. Not done the script on that one. But again, I've kind of backburnered a bit so that I can make sure that I have these following 2 videos figured out, because the timeline on them is so short and I need to be very efficient. I'm so bad at time management. I'm so bad. Like, I know no matter how much I try, I know I'm going to end up really cramming the last week before release on both of these videos. But what I'm really excited for is having way more content out, and I'm hoping that this sort of happens for me moving forward, where I can get like in a little bit of a sponsorship situation, so I can have proper deadlines. Because without a deadline, I let that last 10% of a video really trail on, and I don't think it actually matters that much. I can be way too much of a perfectionist when it comes to these videos, and like I'll spend forever on a video. It's the idea before the pedal kick drum, but that sounds. Yeah, the here I'll show you. This is the next video that's coming out. This is going to be it's an unsponsored video, so I've kind of backburnered it a little bit, but I do want to release this before I release the kick drum videos and stuff like that. This is a Sabek Siren. I don't know if you've seen this before. This is an instrument from the 1800s. But not an instrument like a musical instrument. It was a scientific instrument. And basically this was developed by a guy named August Sabek. And he had, I won't get into it too deep because I've already talked about this a bunch. I'm just, the video will be the best way to sort of explain this whole idea. But he was in a debate with Ohm and Helmholtz, which are 2 massive scientists from back in the day. I'm sure you're familiar with them. But Sabek is like basically unknown to today. But he developed this instrument to prove them wrong, and he actually did. And basically, it's just a spinning disc. When you blow through these holes, it creates a pressure pulse. Obviously, you know, when the tube is sitting in front of a hole, air goes through. As the hole passes through, it interrupts that flow, and so that's how you get, and so it produces notes. And based on how you lay out the holes, you can get different tones, you can get different chords, and like I've printed. You know, this is just some of the discs. And so like all these different discs sound different. Like this one's a cool one. This one has holes, but then also connects some of the holes with these paths. So there's like a bunch of stuff. A lot of these are pretty similar. But basically I wanted to take the scientific instrument and use it in a musical sense, because it's a very playable instrument. So a disc like this, this represents just the major scale, and so you can play this like a regular instrument. You can play melodies and stuff on this. It's really cool. A disc like this that uses, or this is a disc to experiment with how an uneven hole spacing can produce harmonic frequencies and actually pulls out your fundamental frequency. And so Sabek's whole idea was that our ears perceive pitch not based on a fundamental frequency, which is the lowest, loudest frequency when you hear a note. He was convinced that our ears perceive pitch based on all of the harmonics that come after a fundamental note, a fundamental frequency. And Ohm and Helmholtz said, no, you're wrong. You have to have that fundamental frequency in order for your ears to perceive a pitch. And so using this, he was able to prove that you, in fact, do not need a fundamental frequency to hear that specific pitch. And that is in fact correct. And what's crazy about it is I just discovered today that in some sense, this is how like DSP in speakers works. So with really small speakers that seem to produce crazy low bass notes that seem impossible for small speakers, what they'll do is they'll trick your brain by, instead of trying to hit that like 40 hertz frequency that is considered like a really low bass note, it will replay the harmonics that are associated with that 40 note frequency that are much easier for a small speaker cone to hit. And by having those harmonics in there, those overtones, it tricks your brain into thinking that you're actually hearing that 40 hertz frequency without there actually being that 40 hertz frequency there. And so his research on this is now proven science that we actually use in a functional way. And I just discovered that today about DSP while looking at this little kick drum thing. So it's cool how all of these things are starting to connect together, that are individual scientific discoveries that I had never heard of. I don't know many musicians that probably have heard of a lot of these things. But it's all connected. And it all comes down to just like resonance and frequency and how our ears handle those things. And it's all music. It's all just, it's nature. There's a lot of nature in all of this that I don't think most people understand. And, discovering all this stuff for the first time is blowing my mind. It's overwhelming. But it does feel like every individual project I dive down is kind of like adding to this fundamental understanding of what music is and what sound is. I don't know. The funny thing is I don't really know how this is going to affect my ability to make music, because ultimately I love making music and I'm learning all of these things. But at the end of the day, sometimes I just like making dumb music that's not, that doesn't touch on any of this stuff. But I do think it will subconsciously influence how I work. All right, see you, Banana Bread. Great to see you. Thanks for being on here. Noisia have a long history of looking into these tricks, but can't cite a particular interview or source. This is why they have influence the gradual pitch up of snares in drum and bass. Oh, I think I know Noisia, actually. Let me just look this up. That name sounds really familiar. I believe Why do I know them? Could this be? Could this be? Oh yeah, could this be? Yeah. Noisia is cool. Noisia is cool. Oh, I didn't know that about them. I didn't know that they were diving into that stuff. That's fascinating. I'm gonna look through their stuff a bit more now. Yeah, and like at the end of the day, I'm not sure I don't know what my goals are with all of this. I don't know what ultimately I'm aiming for. At the end of the day, I just want to be able to explore this stuff and have a career in getting to explore this stuff. That would be the ultimate goal. Um, I love making music, and it would be really cool to make like songs that uh, people, the masses, can actually enjoy. But I'm more interested in like the discovery of the physics of it all. Um, Nick Ruse in particular. Okay, I'll look into that for sure. Um, and like I don't know, I don't know how much this is gonna actually like impact the music community in a particular way, but it kind of doesn't matter to me. Like I just want to explore this stuff, and if it does have some impact, that's great. But if it's just informing people and inspiring people, that's all I'm aiming for with all of this. Um, like I don't have a goal in mind, and I think that's kind of always been my struggle. Is I love the exploration, I love the journey of these things. I rarely have a specific goal that I'm aiming for. I think a lot of successful people in the world have had like one particular goal that they go towards, and obviously the path there might change from what they're planning, but I'm kind of taking a slightly different approach, and hopefully it works. I don't want to. I want to be able to do this for a living. It's the only thing that's ever felt complete for me. So hopefully this stuff gets people excited and can help people get inspired. Because everything I do is usually a result of me being inspired by something I've seen, something I've watched. Um, uh, 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 oh, my wife messaged me 1 second. It was a while ago. I missed it. Yeah, I don't really know what to do. We're an hour and a half in. I still got some time to work on things. I kind of want to come back to the kick drum pedal idea and maybe start looking into how I'm going to do this. If that's cool. But if I'm happy to talk about other stuff too, or like do something else as well. But that was sort of my goal today. Is I wanted to start to understand how I can convert this into something new. Um, and I am leaning towards just adapting this because this is already built to take the abuse. It already launches this beater at a surface, and all I need to do is figure out the actual catchment mechanism. I need to like decouple the pedal itself from the beater at the point of contact. I kind of feel like this spring needs to go. And we might have to do a counterweight thing. Something's happening outside. Give me 1 sec. We got hail. Oh, it's melting. It's melting dramatically quickly. God, why is it hailing? This is crazy. Holy! It's coming down. Hold on. This is nuts. Oh. This weather's starting to drive me crazy. It was like summer weather for a week there, and now it's hailing like a mofo. Um, can you hear that? Can you hear like it's so loud in here right now? I got a metal roof, so I text my wife see if she's seeing this. It's very distracting. Okay, so basically what I'm thinking is a piano key doesn't have a spring. A kick drum pedal has a spring. And I'm not too sure. It's got to be. I think it's just this microphone. It's a dynamic mic, so it's not picking up the loud noise of the hail. But it's like it's coming down. I wish I could show you. It seems like it's kind of settling out a little bit now, though. A piano key doesn't use a spring. It's just using counterweight. I don't know how important the spring is, because the issue with the spring is when it's on, it pulls the beater back, but it also prevents, it also prevents the beater from moving forward. But I guess not much, and it's actually not, the spring isn't doing too much. It's pretty subtle, and it's also so rusty. This is a kick drum pedal I had sitting in my garage for like 5 years. Yeah, how do we do this? Because right now, the beater is directly coupled, kind of, to the cam here. And so when you press down, I need this to instead just throw the beater at the skin. And then once it does, the beater needs to come back, but not the pedal. And what's interesting is, like, with the pedal, if you press it down all the way and you get to this point, the beater can still move forward independently. Obviously, the spring is really, really working against it at this point. But that is kind of what we want. We want this to be able to launch forward independently of the pedal. So it kind of already does that. It's doing it in the wrong spot. I need that to happen up here. So theoretically, I guess if I just put a chunk of something... I got this battery. If I put this battery under here... Okay, I'm taking the spring off again. That's starting to feel more piano-like. Because now this is... I think I'm going to need this whole thing to be a lot lighter, too. Which is going to be hard to do, because it also has to take the abuse. I'm going to probably just, like, sit on this for a few days. Or, like, a day before I start actually designing anything. I really just need to visualize how this is supposed to work. And like, because what I'm thinking is instead of, what am I thinking? I've been like brainstorming. I've been brainstorming a lot the last few days. And we drove to town yesterday, which is like an hour and a half each direction. And driving is where I usually come up with ideas the best. But it also is like kind of a mentally exhausting thing as a result. So I'm feeling a little like my brain's like pretty full. Could probably use a nap. But I do think this is already kind of close to what we're going for. It's already kind of close to what we're going for. Okay, hail stopped already. I'm gonna pull up an image here, and I'll let you guys see kind of what I'm looking at here. I wish I could. There's got to be a GIF, right? So low quality, but look how crazy this is. Oh, I'm totally blocking it. 1 second. Yeah, look how crazy this is. So complex. Hey, Tin Talon, how you doing? I know, right? And like I just find it so funny that like this was clearly made, like it was kind of like perfected before we had like CNC machining or 3D printing and like manufacturing techniques like that. Like this was developed at a time when like a lot of this stuff was probably like whittled, and it still looks like that. Doesn't matter how expensive of a piano you get, it still looks like that. And I like, it's almost like, do cheaper pianos use plastic parts for this? I've never seen that. I've only ever seen these weird wooden whittled parts in a piano before. But it's such a beautiful mechanism, and it does so much, and it's like built perfectly to work with like human intuition. You know, you can walk up to a keyboard as a child and within seconds understand how it functions. And that is so cool. But it is so complex. And so like obviously I was thinking about just straight up rebuilding this, but I think it would be way more interesting if I just, you know, took the fundamental concept of this and tried to add it to this instead. And you know, I think we can make something that's like almost like looks completely different, but does work in the same way. Like I'm thinking instead of having so like this the jack bar here, this little silver thing, that pushes on the hammer butt, and that's what throws the hammer against the string, but you can see it slips out of the way, and that's what lets the hammer fall back after the string or after the keys depressed. And so like the kick drum pedal equivalent, we have a chain that is throwing. This might be a lot simpler than I thought, because we have a chain that's throwing it, and the chain automatically has sort of like this ability to throw it, and then as the pedal stops, the chain, because the chain's flexible, the beater does still travel on its own. Right? And it only needs to be that much. Is that all it's doing? What is the whole point of this catchment thing? So the other, so the way this works, you have this jack that pushes up against the thing. That's all fine. But it also has this green pad here catches the hammer, so that you don't need to allow, the hammer doesn't need to fall all the way back in order for the jack to re-engage with the butt. But I'm wondering if we need any of that, because this chain never technically becomes disengaged because it's flexible. The flexibleness of the chain is what essentially throws the beater, and then it re-engages just once the beater comes back. And so like we could have it so it's sitting back here, and then you can do tiny little taps. I'll be totally honest. Like sometimes when I'm working on these things, I like talk to Gemini or like Claude or something, and I asked them. I said, "Is there a simpler way to do this mechanism?" And they said, "No." They said, "This is the only way this mechanism works, or this is the simplest version of this mechanism because this took 300 years to develop." But I'm kind of thinking they might be wrong. I'm kind of thinking we could simplify the hell out of this. Like, look how many individual moving parts there are. That I think this could really do it in a much simpler way, because all it needs to do is right before the beater hits the actual surface, it needs to disengage from the jack, which in this design, it requires the actual jack piece that's throwing the hammer to move out of the way. That's why I gotta find a clearer GIF of this. I gotta find a clearer GIF of this. This is a grand piano, so it's a little bit different. Nice. This is a grand piano. It's a little bit different. But so in the grand piano, this is the jack. And see how it pushes up on the hammer. This is almost going too fast. It pushes up on the hammer, and then it slips out of the way in order to let the hammer fall back off the string on its own. This doesn't need that, because if the pedal stops at this point, the chain allows the beater to still carry on forward. So maybe we just need like a tiny amount of spring back. So it goes there. But then the overall, but then there needs to be one main spring that actually pulls the whole system back. Okay, let's put the spring back on. Actually, this might still work. Yeah, the problem is the spring. The spring, which does return the beater to its resting position and returns the pedal back to its starting position, also really prevents the beater from carrying on, because now the spring tension is putting a lot of pressure on and not letting this beater launch forward. But you can kind of picture if instead of the beater being rigidly attached to this axle here, if it was floppy, then this would be able to just flex and just go boop. If it was floppy. I'm sorry, this isn't like, it's hard for me to talk while I'm kind of thinking about this. Like, look how cool this is. When this goes up and the jack presses on this foam pad here, it pushes up on the hammer, and then this L shape hits this pad, which pulls the jack out of the way of the hammer. I'm not too sure what this piece does, to be honest. What does that piece do? Okay. And grand piano mechanisms and grand piano mechanisms and upright piano mechanisms are different. There's a little bit more nuance. Like you can hit notes a lot faster on a grand piano, apparently. And I wonder if it is because of that one thing that I don't know what it does. But like the upright is much closer to what we're kind of aiming for, because it's just it kind of is just a glorified kick drum pedal already. And like your fingers move a lot faster than your foot does. So I'm thinking that's okay. And I've never played a upright piano and been like, oh, I wish this was a grand piano. I mean, I technically have, but not for the speed, just for the cool factor. This GIF isn't very good, though, because that part's not even contacting that part. There's so much flex in that hinge. I don't think that's actually physically working the way we want it to. There we go. This one looks good. Sometimes I just need to like sit and stare at something for a while. To use the upright, since this is a kick drum, unless we just move. Yeah, no, I'm more interested in the upright mechanism. But at the end of the day, I don't want to do either. At the end of the day, I want to just take the principles of what's happening in these mechanisms and add them here. So, for example, I asked, so here's the 4 non-negotiable features of true piano action. So 1, a true piano mechanism isn't just a lever that pushes a hammer. It has to master 4 distinct mechanical behaviors. 1, escapement. The hammer must be thrown towards the string, but escape the control of the key right before impact. If it didn't, holding the key down would press the hammer hard against the string, deadening the sound immediately. So right off the bat, we're very close to an escapement mechanism here, because let's say your surface is here. You press the pedal down, and you can hold it down, and the beater does still have the ability to move forward. Right now, the spring on here is really preventing it. You have to hit it super hard for it to actually get to the point of, to get enough momentum to hit this. But if we take the spring off, right now, if I were to press the beater lightly or press the pedal lightly, technically the beater stops here, but it does allow for the beater to move forward and strike the string. So this does have escapement properties already, equivalent to orbiting the model, but in GIF form. I'm not too sure what you mean by that. So in order to have this properly escape from the, I think we just need like a double series of springs. We have one spring that returns the pedal and the beater back to its resting state. And then we have an additional really light load spring that allows the beater to just move forward slightly, tap the thing, but then bring it right back. Right, so this will be one spring. There will be one spring that allows this motion, and then a master spring that brings the whole thing back. Right off the bat, I think that's all we need to do the escapement, which is exceedingly simple in comparison. The weight of the chain brings it forward. Could you add a spring to something? Yeah, right? So just 2 springs. One spring for the main action, and then another spring that allows it, a light spring, so that it doesn't take much force for the momentum of the beater to hit the drum, but enough that it can bring it back to this point. All of a sudden, we are like very closely mimicking the attack of a piano right there. Which is crazy. That's so much simpler than what's going on in a piano. So I don't really know what Gemini's saying. Okay, so but that's just the one. That's just the first non-negotiable feature. The second, repetition, double escapement. On a grand piano, you must be able to restrike a note rapidly without the key having to return all the way to the top of its stroke. So in this case, I think we still get that. Because like realistically, we could have that light spring. It could be literally this far. And so your first initial strike will obviously carry this and have enough momentum to slap the skin, and then it'll bounce back here. And then the main spring can pull this back, and already at this point you can strike it again if you want to. It's not going to be a powerful strike, but that's okay.
If you need a more powerful strike, you just have to wait like a fraction of a second for it to come back here. So I think repetition's fine too. I'm not seeing how this is not able to do that. Checking. After the hammer bounces off the string, it must be caught midair so it doesn't bounce back up and hit the string a second time. So that is one thing that I don't exactly know how to do yet. But I think we could literally just have like a little arm. So what that's saying is once it gets to this point, once the beater is independent of the pedal, it needs to hit. Ooh. So that's what the light spring technically already does. It kind of catches it. But would the literal bounce off of the thing be enough? No, I think literally a light little spring would handle the checking as well. And then damping is the fourth thing, which is a whole independent mechanism that we just connect to the pedal as opposed to the axle here. And so when you depress the pedal, the damper comes off. And it's not until this whole thing returns that the damper gets pressed up against the drum. I don't know. This is this is feeling like a million times simpler than what this piano mechanism is doing. And in just this like really rough analysis of it, I think it can do everything. And it's like making like it's so simple that it's making me feel like there's something wrong with this idea. Which is kind of like I kind of like that. I don't understand why the pianos are so complicated when this seems like it can do exactly the same thing. Now, obviously, but like you could easily scale this down to work. It's like so simple that it's making me almost feel like this is too simple to do a whole video on. I was hoping this was going to have to be a little more complicated, but I don't think it is. Which is fine. I guess, we can just the damping mechanism is going to be fairly involved naturally. Kind of. And if I want this to work on a regular kick drum, I would need the damper to come from the front, which is like the opposite direction, but like a simple gear can reverse the direction of this axle, and then all of a sudden when that moves forward, this moves back, and then like that. So like that's not complicated. But it might be complicated enough. That might be just the amount of complication we need for this to really work. But yeah, it feels weird. It feels weird. Okay. Sorry, I missed some chats here. Seems too easy to be true. Integration hell, here we come. Is that a stuff made here quote? He's my favorite YouTuber. Just a joke about CAD folks orbiting the model. Oh yeah, exactly. Oh my god, I do that so much. But what if you want 2 powerful strikes? Need to figure that out later. Well, the thing is, this whole thing that we're doing, like just adding that, all we're doing is making it so that the pedal stops just shy of the actual surface it's hitting, and allowing the momentum to just tap it on its own and then return back. But at the end of the day, this is still just a regular kick drum pedal. And so this should return at the same rate that a regular kick drum pedal returns at. And on a regular kick drum pedal, you can do as many powerful hits as your foot can manage. And like obviously, if you're doing like heel toe where it's really fast, you're not getting multiple powerful hits. You're only getting as powerful of a hit as you can do in the time that this has to return back. But like I've never felt like I'm hitting the kick drum so fast that I can't get 2 full powerful hits back to back. And I don't think adding that little spring is going to change a lot at all. Like maybe the tiniest little bit, it might be slightly laggier. But I think it's going to be negligible, because on top of having the little spring that holds this beater back, with all this momentum, when it comes forward and strikes the skin, it's going to bounce back just from the strike on its own. Like we almost don't even need the spring that holds it here, but the spring will just make sure it doesn't accidentally like rest against the thing. The spring will just be there to help it along. Other than that, this is still just a regular kick drum pedal. Yeah, like I'm thinking the lag. I'm thinking the only difference here is this tiny little movement. And I think in the grand scheme of things, when you're playing this and you're also factoring the fact that this is going to bounce right off immediately, it's going to be so not noticeable. This might be one of those things where the idea seems really complicated, but the actual implementation of it is so simple that hopefully people are like, why didn't I think of that? Because like a lot of the best ideas are why didn't I think of that kind of thing. I just don't understand why this hasn't been done before now. Because like literally on the surface, just having a pedal on its own that you can bury the beater, but you'll never actually, where you can play with a buried beater technique, but the beater doesn't ever actually stay against the skin. That would be so useful for so many people, because while it is a technique and while like burying the beater is something you choose to do, a lot of people, for a lot of drummers, and like for me for a while, I could only bury the beater. It didn't feel comfortable to not bury the beater. But it wasn't until I went into a recording scenario where the engineer was like, it sounds so much better if you don't bury it. And so I had to in that moment, I had to really focus on not burying it. And since that point, I don't, it doesn't feel weird either way. But up until that point, I was burying the beater not out of technique, but out of just like convenience. And so like that, if you're a beater barrier player and that's just how you play, but you've always wanted that sustain out of your drum, that alone, like literally the tiniest little thing, all we're doing is we're adding a little bit of like flex to this, or not flex, but we're just like allowing this to move a little bit back and forth, and then just putting a little spring on it. That alone would change the sound for a lot of drummers. I think why this is so much simpler is we don't have to worry about the rattling of a metal spring on a metal string. Yeah, and like I think at the end of the day, like these piano mechanisms are very elegant and super, super lightweight compared to a kick drum pedal. And so, like, you know, if we got this working properly, it's not like piano manufacturers would be like, oh, that's a better mechanism for a piano because it's, you know, this is using bearings and stuff like this. But I feel like if you were to do what I'll do maybe what I'm going to do for this video is, the premise is going to be I want to build a kick drum pedal that works like a piano keyboard key, a piano key. But in doing so, I'll end up fully 3D printing a brand new piano key mechanism that does all the same stuff as the one on screen, but in a dramatically simpler way. And just use that as a way to explain what I'm trying to do here. But at the end of the day, seeing if simplifying what a piano key is supposed to do is even possible, which now I'm thinking it's super possible. I'm thinking this could be like I'm thinking it's so simple we could probably do this in like a couple moving parts. I'm thinking this can be done in a couple moving parts. And it's like it's so potentially like so much simpler to the point where I'm wondering why this wasn't the natural evolution of it to begin with. Like why did it end up so goddamn complicated? And why are we still doing it this way if there's a way to do it with like, cuz like how crazy would it be if this whole mechanism, this whole piano mechanism could be replaced by literally like 2 3D printed parts or 2 CNC machine parts or injection molded parts that feel exactly the same as a regular piano key. Like pianos are funny because they're like insanely, some pianos are $1 million pianos. While you can literally go on Facebook Marketplace and find free pianos all day, every day. And obviously it's, what makes it expensive isn't these mechanisms. What makes it expensive is the materials used and like, but I can't imagine that, like for a MIDI controller, for example, you could have a MIDI controller that has a really, really cheap mechanism that works exactly the same as a piano keyboard. So you would have the exact same action as a piano keyboard without any of the engineering complexity. I don't know. I'm enjoying this. I think I'm gonna wrap up. Here because I gotta cook dinner. I'm cooking steaks for everybody today, so I'm gonna wrap up a little earlier so I can get those prepped and on the grill. And I think it's a good point to kind of based in this idea and really like marinate in it. Since we're talking about grilled meats. Yeah, let's I'll work on it this weekend, and then on Monday we can see where we're at. I'll try. I'm saying this now. I'm gonna try and have a prototype printed up. Probably not the one that fits on the kick drum pedal, but one that is like fully 3D printed, like almost like a 2D, basically like this GIF. See if I can have a functioning prototype by Monday. I will do this. All right, thanks so much for being here, Psycho Ruby Gamer. Have a good night. Yeah, we're gonna wrap up here anyway, so you're not gonna miss anything. I suspect this is one of those instances where musicians are reluctant to play newer versions of instruments because of a certain mysticism, like tone and guitar. Yeah, totally. And at the end of the day, like I'm not trying to invent something that I want to like actually sell necessarily. I've tried selling things in the past, and I absolutely hate it. So I just love the discovery. I love the inventing process, and if it is like crazy enough that it could potentially be a product, I would want to work with somebody on that, but I wouldn't want to do it myself anyways. So I'm not worried about people being turned off by it or whatever. I just want to explore it because this is crazy. These mechanisms are insane. All right, take it easy, Banana Bread. Good to see you again. This mechanism, like these piano key mechanisms, are so complex, and like I'm feeling like really doesn't need to be that complex, but we'll see. And that's what this is all about. So yes, thank you for being here. We'll wrap up here. Monday, same time, I think is going to be the goal. I actually do have a slightly busy weekend, so we'll see how much I get done, but hopefully I'll have a functioning prototype by Monday. That's the goal. I might even jump on the stream this weekend while I'm modeling it. Don't know yet. We'll figure that out. Okay, thanks everybody. Take it easy. Have a great weekend.